Sandy Says Read, and welcome to the channel. This evening we are going to do a review and discussion of the three-body problem. I believe that the correct way to say the author's name is Liu Cixin. I do not know if that is absolutely correct, so I apologize if I have screwed that up. I am going to try my very best to avoid even saying the author's name from now on because I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to be disrespectful. We'll see how I do. Now, first, let's see some housekeeping items. You guys, please go to the drop-down box below where you will see a link to the Sandy Says Read Bingo Baker card. Go there and generate your Bingo Baker card so that you can play bingo while we go through this video. All right. There's no prizes. There's no great, wonderful thing you get other than the dopamine rush each time you check off one of the words and phrases that I say here. All right. Also, I would like to welcome you to subscribe to the channel. If this is your first time here, it's going to be random and crazy. I will do a lot of rambling, but you guys, at this channel, we talk about books. We love books. We find something good in books and we talk about them. So it's a good time if you like literature, books, poetry, all things fantasy, fiction, etc. Please invite your friends to subscribe to the channel too, because that's what we do here. It's usually entertaining. You can see how many times I screw up. All right, what we're going to do today is go through my notes. I'm ancient, so I've got the notes to keep us on track. You guys, this is 6 pages of notes, front and back. For some of them, we've got a lot to cover. It's going to take us a little while. So sit back, relax, enjoy. We are going to talk about the good and the not so good in the three-body problem. I have spoken on this channel a few times of how I was having some difficulty getting through the novel. I'm going to be upfront and honest with you guys. I did not thoroughly enjoy the book. I read it. I got all the way through. We're going to talk a little bit about an experience I had on the plane while reading it as well. We'll talk about that too. But you guys know here on this channel, we do not drag books. We do not drag authors. When we talk about any negatives or problematic items in books, we also talk about the good stuff in the books too. Plenty of good, positive things in this book. So we're going to talk about those also. All right. This is an honest review. This is the whole thing. Good, bad, and the ugly. All the good. All right. We talk about it all. So let's start with the specs. This is The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin. I think that's how you say it. And in the Chinese language, in their culture, you say the surname first. It's a thing. Okay. It's translated by Liu Ken. Here we go. First, this is the first book of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. This is the first book, Three-Body Problem. Second book is The Dark Forest. Third book is Death's End. This is also, for me, this is book 3 of the Clock Reading Challenge in 2024. Hence the number 3. I will not think of it later, but if I think of it later, I'll put a link in the drop-down box below to the Clock Reading Challenge video so you can see what that is all about. Okay, so this was first published in 2006. The English translation was published in 2014. This is by Tor, a trademark of Macmillan Publishing Group. This one is 390 pages. This version is 390 pages, plus there's an author's postscript at the end, there's a translator's postscript at the end, and a couple excerpts from other stories that the author has written. You see right here, it says winner of a Hugo Award. This one won the Hugo in 2015. So that was before there was some wackiness with the Hugo. We're not going to go into that here on this channel. We're focusing on the positive here. Okay, so the airplane, page 2 of my notes. Let's talk about what happened on the airplane. So I was reading this on the plane on the way home from a business trip, and the gal in the seat next to me, she had a book of her own to read, and she looked at mine and she says, "Oh, is that book any good? Are you enjoying it? And I paused for a second, and I wasn't going to lie to her. And I said, no. And she laughed. She laughed. And so we had a great conversation talking about the book, talking about the Netflix series. She had watched, I guess the first 1 or 2 episodes were out by then. She had watched it and she had not enjoyed the Netflix version of the book. So we talked about that a little bit because I don't have Netflix. That's a whole nother Oprah show for another day. I don't have Netflix, don't want it, don't need it. And so I'm not going to see this on Netflix. So we talked about that a little bit. And yeah, so it was interesting though. She admired the fact that I was forcing myself to finish the book, even though I wasn't enjoying it. And so I told her, like, hey, you know, there are some positive things in here. You know, every time you see a pink tab, that's where I saw something like really cool. And I wanted to remember and call it out later. So I put a pink tab on the things that were really cool and just really cool and fun and didn't want to lose track of. The red tabs are things that were problematic. So yeah, that's okay. But we're going to talk about those good things. Okay. So yeah, that was the conversation on the airplane. It was really fun to get to sit next to and talk to someone who enjoyed reading kind of like I did. She was really excited. She was reading a book by Lee Child. And so she was talking about, you know, how she enjoyed murder mysteries and thrillers and that kind of thing, especially. That was her, I think that was her favorite genre. Moving on. Okay, so there will be pros and cons in this video. There will be some positives and frustrations. We're going to talk about it all because what's the mantra here? There's always something good in a book. So we're going to find it. One of the things that I think was really a positive in this is I think the author gave a glimmer of hope toward the end of this book. I think there was this tiny little glimmer of hope. And he gave it to these 3 characters, and we're going to look at them on page 387 and 388. The 3 characters are these 2 scientists, physicists, and one of them is Ding Yi, and the main character, Wang Miao, and the detective, Da Shi. And the detective is the one who offers us this glimmer of hope. And I found that intriguing. I should warn you guys, I'm going to be giving spoilers. I should have said that right up front. This is going to be a huge spoiler because it's clear back here at page 387, right? Everything I talk about in this is probably going to be a spoiler. So let me just say that right now. I don't think that I could talk about all the positives and negatives and characters and character developments and stuff without spoiling big, huge things that happen in the book. And if you've watched the series already, then you already know what I'm going to be talking about. But I'm just going to let you know right now that what I'm about to say, what I'm about to read for you is going to spoil some stuff. Okay. So if you don't want to be spoiled, now is the time to step away from the video. Watch one of my other videos. I've got lots of videos here on the channel, 300 and some odd, right? Thank you for tuning in. Thumbs up. Let's move on. Okay, so the detective, Da Shi, gave this glimmer of hope. And it was really odd that that detective, who was such a really obnoxious character throughout the book, is the one giving this glimmer of hope for humanity. Okay, so here it is. He's saying, at least I think this is from his point of view, okay? This is not in quotes. It's just, I think, from his point of view. It says, look at them, the bugs. Humans have used everything in their power to extinguish them. Every kind of poison, aerial sprays, introducing and cultivating their natural predators, searching for and destroying their eggs, using genetic modification to sterilize them, burning with fire, drowning with water. Every family has bug spray. Every desk has a fly swatter under it. This long war has been going on for the entire history of human civilization, but the outcome is still in doubt. The bugs have not been eliminated. They still proudly live between the heavens and the earth, and their numbers have not diminished from the time before the appearance of humans. The Trisolarans, who deemed the humans bugs, seem to have forgotten one fact. The bugs have never been truly defeated. A small black cloud covered the sun and cast a moving shadow against the ground. This was not a common cloud, but a swarm of locusts that had just arrived. As the swarm landed in the fields nearby, The three men stood in the middle of a living shower, feeling the dignity of life on earth. Ding Yi and Wang Mao poured the 2 bottles of wine they had with them on the ground beneath their feet, a toast for the bugs. Da Shi, thank you. Wang held out his hand. I thank you as well. Ding gripped Da Shi's other hand. Let's get back, Wang said. There's so much to do. And that is the glimmer of hope that I saw in this book. Right then, there was no other glimmer of hope. That was the glimmer of hope. I mean, the fact that the Trisolarans, who are coming to extinguish us, see us as bugs is a sad, scary thing. But the bugs on Earth have survived all the ways that this higher intelligence, the humans, have tried to extinguish them. So the Trisolarans, with their higher intelligence coming to try and extinguish us, might not happen, might not work, might not go so well, because if we are like bugs, we can survive. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was really interesting that it came from Da Shi. There you go. Okay. The reason I'm bringing it up, that this glimmer of hope was happening there, is because so much of the book, so many of the concepts and themes and thoughts were negative and disheartening. Okay. For example, on page 314 to 315, let me get there for you. Okay. I even wrote in the on the page itself, in the margin, I wrote the anti-Star Trek. And I wrote, this book's theme of all humanity is evil is perfect for Netflix. And I think so. I mean, well, let me read for you this, and this will give you a flavor of the author's writing too. This will give you a flavor, a sense of how he writes. We have one of the main characters. I saw 2 main characters, and this one is Ye Wingji. I might not be pronouncing her name correctly, but we refer to her as Ye or Yi throughout the book. And she has just arrived with a gentleman named Mike Evans on his oil tanker, a reformed oil tanker out in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, they've arrived here. Ye stepped off the helicopter and heard a familiar howl. It was caused by the giant antenna slicing through the wind over the sea. The sound again drew her thoughts to the past. On the broad deck below the antenna, about 2,000 people stood in a dense crowd. Evans walked up to her and solemnly said, using the frequency and coordinates you provided, we received a message from Trisolaris. We've confirmed everything you told me. Ye nodded calmly. The great Trisolaran fleet has already set sail. Their target is this solar system, and they will arrive in 450 years. Ye remained calm. Nothing could surprise her anymore. Evans pointed to the crowd behind him. You're looking at the first members of the Earth Trisolaris organization. Our ideal is to invite Trisolaran civilization to reform human civilization, to curb human madness and evil, so that the Earth can once again become a harmonious, prosperous, sinless world. More and more people identify with our ideal, and our organization is growing rapidly. We have members all over the world. What can I do? He asked in a soft voice. You will become the commander-in-chief of the Earth Trisolaris movement. This is the wish of all ETO fighters. Ye remained silent for a few seconds. Then she nodded slowly. I'll do my best. Evans raised a fist and shouted at the crowd, Eliminate human tyranny! Accompanied by the sound of crashing waves and the wind howling against the antenna, the ETO fighters shouted as one, The world belongs to Trisolaris! This was the day that the Earth Trisolaris movement formally began. Basically, these people, the Adventist movement of the Earth Trisolaris movement, have invited the Trisolarans, have been in communication with the Trisolarans to come to Earth to take over because the Earth is evil. The people of Earth, we're evil, we're terrible, we need to be reformed and re-educated, whatever. But this fits with, this theme seems to agree with the author's view of humanity. Let's look at page 395. This is in the author's postscript. And he's saying, and this is the author writing this to us, there's a strange contradiction revealed by the naivety and kindness demonstrated by the humanity when faced with the universe. On Earth, humankind can step onto another continent and without a thought destroy the kindred civilizations found there through warfare and disease. I'm going to stop for a second and let that sink in, because that is a sad statement to make. And what a shame. What a shame that the author sees that in our world as our world. What a shame. Yes. Okay, let's get real for a minute. Yes, there are an awful lot of movements throughout history, wars throughout history, tribal problems throughout history, people crossing borders to infiltrate and destroy. Yes, that happens. Yeah, think about it. But that's not all we are. That's not all we are. Not every person, individual, migrant crossing the southern border of the United States right now is coming in for the purpose of destroying the United States. Okay. There are innocent people crossing the southern border. There are people who are just coming to the United States from somewhere else in search of better, in search of hope, in search of good, in search of betterment, not in search of conquest, right? Are you tracking with me here? So wow, there is a strange contradiction revealed by the naivety and kindness demonstrated by humanity when faced with the universe. On Earth, humankind can step onto another continent and without a thought destroy the kindred civilizations found there through warfare and disease. And I don't want to say that's all in the past, because obviously it's not. But that's not all. That's not all. And I hope someone is telling that author, this author, that's not all. That's not all. Okay, but let's go on, because here comes the contradiction. But when they gaze up at the stars, they turn sentimental and believe that if extraterrestrial intelligences exist, they must be civilizations bound by universal, noble, moral constraints, as if cherishing and loving different forms of life are parts of a self-evident universal code of conduct. And that's kind of the Star Trek concept, right? It would be the Star Trek concept, which I like. I mean, isn't that why like Star Trek Next Generation appealed to us so much? Because we had these clean, pretty ships. Even the original Star Trek, we had these clean ships going out, exploring space and seeing different intelligent life forms, that some of them were good, some of them were not so good. But why must we assume that because we think some civilizations can be good, this is a contradiction? This is naive. This is moving on. I think it should be precisely the opposite. Let's turn the kindness we show toward the stars to members of the human race on Earth and build up the trust and understanding between the different peoples and civilizations that make up humanity. Same. I am with him there 100%. Yes, we should be helping one another. We should be trusting one another. There are organizations that do that. I'm wondering if maybe because of where our author is located, he has not been educated on that. But for the universe outside the solar system, we should be ever vigilant and be ready to attribute the worst of intentions to any others that might exist in space. Ready to attribute, sorry guys, I do know how to talk. But for the universe outside the solar system, we should be ever vigilant and be ready to attribute the worst of intentions to any others that might exist in space. For a fragile civilization like ours, this is without a doubt the most responsible path. I wrote something in the margin with, yeah, this poor dude lives in fear. I think that our author lives in fear of extraterrestrials coming to Earth and bombarding us all. And okay, valid, but what a shame. What a shame. And that message is all over this book. Even the Trisolarans have this fear Okay, and we see that fear on page 359. Page 359. Yeah, I wrote in the margin, let's just assume war. We have the Trisolarans speaking. They're on their own planet. They're talking to one another. And we've received this communique on that ship we were just on. Oh, the ship is named Judgment Day. Cool. Okay, so the princeps of the Trisolarans is speaking to one of his underlings. He says, yes, it's easy to imagine. The location of Trisolaris has been exposed. To eliminate future threats, an interstellar fleet from Earth will launch a counterattack against us. He's just assuming that's going to happen. It's very possible that long before an expanded sun swallows this planet, Trisolaran civilization will have already been extinguished by humans. The bright future had suddenly turned impossibly grim. The attendees fell silent. The princeps said, what we must do next is contain the progress of science on Earth, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to give away the big plot if I go any further, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But what I wanted to mention, the reason I bring this up, the reason I talk about this sense of these poor people thinking everything is bad, and these people wanting or thinking, assuming that it's going to be war. It's such a shame. I mean, obviously that's the plot of the book. So we've got to have that for the plot of the book, but it's a shame. It's a shame that the author thinks that's what we've got. That's a shame. Although I really like the message the author was giving us in his second paragraph there of, it would be better for us humans here on Earth to turn toward one another and help one another. And rather than trying to conquer one another, we try to help one another. We try to build one another up. I like that message. I like that hopefulness. There are organizations that try to do that. And yeah, there we go. What did I write here? Hang on, guys. There's more. Oh, okay. Why did I think this fit in here? You guys, if you're a regular follower of my channel, you know that I also watch the behavior panel. They try to upload, or they do upload a video like every week. And I rarely get to see the premiere because I work during the day, but I watch these videos. And this past week they did, they analyzed the interrogation of, was it Michael Bevers? Yeah, Michael Bevers, the younger of these two brothers who like annihilated their family, right? And in that analysis, Mark Bowden explained that if you take away someone's value system, if you take away everything that they believe in or that they understood, if you take away all their values, they're left with nothing. And they do see civilization as pointless. They do see society as pointless. And that pointless society, that pointlessness is what was permeating this story. A shame, but Mark also pointed out, and I think Greg was backing him up on this, if you take away that value system, you need to replace it with something, or else that pointlessness and that sense of there's no hope, there's no point, society is stupid, can lead to annihilation, can lead to people who kill their families, right? I mean, if you take away someone's value system, if you take away their point and their reason, you need to fill that void with something, hopefully something good, but yeah, you need to give them something else, or else that pointlessness just erodes them. And I saw a lot of erosion happening in the three-body problem because there was a value taken away from Ye Wenjing, if I'm saying her name right. And because that was taken away, she saw pointlessness. I saw her as a very blank character, and she lost hope. She saw pointlessness and betrayed us to the Trisolarans. So let's talk about Trisolaris a bit and our synopsis before we go into those characters, before we talk about the characters. Because I was about to dive into characters there. So let's go on to page 3 of my notes. Trisolaris, that is the planet out there that we're dealing with in the three-body problem. Trisolaris has 3 suns. Hence our three-body problem. There's 3 bodies, 3 stars. And I think it was Isaac Newton. It's been a little while since I was in school. I think it was Isaac Newton who told us, when you add a third body, and This is my paraphrasing, okay? When you add a third body, you can no longer determine or prove how inertia or forces will make those bodies act. Like if you have one body, you can guess how gravity and whatnot will act upon it. When you add a second body, you can make equations, whatever, to figure out how gravity and inertia and forces will act upon it. But when you add that third body, all bets are off, right? Okay. This is Sandy's paraphrasing of physics. Okay, so one faction of the Earth Trisolarans organization developed a video game. Think Ender's Game, because yeah, this video game is real. Okay, one faction of this ETO developed a video game. And in that video game, which factors heavily in, I guess, like the first third of the book, in that video game, the players are trying to solve the three-body problem for a civilization, a number of civilizations on this Trisolaris planet. Now, the video game players, the players don't really recognize that they're trying to solve this problem for a real planet out there in space. They're just trying to solve this problem, right? And one of our main characters, Wang Mao, he gets into the video game. He's in there to play it, although I don't think he actually plays. I never got the impression that he was doing anything other than observing. He was very passive in the game. He just kind of like walked around and listened to what the other characters were doing. It's fine. We got a lot of exposition. So he's in there, you know, observing the game, and we're learning how, you know, we're learning that when there's only one sun, things are stable. When there's two suns, things can be stable or they can be hot. And when there's a third sun, oh my God, it's a chaotic era. And we've got to figure out how to solve this chaotic era problem with the three-body problem, the three-sun problem, okay? And when the video game players and the video game administrators finally admit that, okay, the problem can't be solved. It cannot be solved. The Trisolarans have got to give up on that and just go invade some other planet. They've got to leave their planet because their planet is going to be swallowed by these three stars. They've got to go. Yeah. So the aliens have to leave their doomed world. So here's my synopsis of what we've got happening in the three-body problem. Ye Wingji, when she is like just out of college age and she's like ready to be an astrophysicist, she witnesses the murder of her father, whom she loves and whom is a friend of hers. They're friends. She witnesses his murder during a struggle session during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Okay, her father is a scientist and he's been teaching scientific theories that we know to be accurate now, right? But at the time, they were considered too outlandish, right? And because they were outlandish, he shouldn't have been teaching them. And so he got basically beat to death on a stage in front of a lot of people, including his daughter. And she tried to get to him, tried to get to the stage to stop what was happening, but some janitors held her back. And they told her, if you go up there, they'll kill you too. Just, you know, they held her back. And she was screaming and crying and very distraught, as you would be, because her father was murdered in front of her. Her mother was part of the group on the stage questioning her father, part of the group that was basically berating him and telling him he was an enemy to the people, an enemy to the party, an enemy to the Chinese government, and deserved to have what was happening to him. He deserved to die because he was anti-party. Okay, so she saw this. She also saw the aftermath, the death of a friend of hers who was also a scientist. And this friend of hers was very close to her. So she lost two important people in her life on the same day within, hours of one another. And this affected her. This changed her. This made her what I saw as a very dispassionate, disconnected, flat character. Like if she was going on an arc, it stopped right there. Like she became this flat, disinterested character to whom things happened from then on. Now we will have an instance where she does something to destroy Earth, where she does something later, but for a long time she's just very flat, from as one would be. I mean, you've just seen the murder of your parent, and a friend is dead. And so, yes, you're going to have some mental health struggles after that. That makes perfect sense. Okay. But okay, so what do I have here? Da-da-da-da. Okay, when she goes to work at like a land clearing thing, they're cutting down trees and whatnot. She goes to work at this like camp. Okay. Well, she's there. Someone betrays her. She needs to be reformed. Right. And the government's going to reform her. But one of her father's former students is like, oh, you can come work up here at the Red Coast base, which is, this great big huge antenna thing where they're sending out messages into the universe. They're sending out radio waves, yada, yada, yada. She goes there and she's like saved from having to go through this reform stuff, whatever the government might be doing to her in reform stuff, right? She goes there instead. But it's as if she's just passively being dragged through, okay, this decision, now this decision, now this decision. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that next. Okay, yeah, I'll do that next. Okay, I don't care what's going to happen to me. I'll do that next. And the former student tells her, okay, look, if you come to Red Coast Base, if you decide to stay here now instead of going off to this reform thing, you're going to be here the rest of your life. They're not going to let you leave. If you come to Red Coast Base, you're here. End of sentence. You're here. And she's like, okay, fine, that's great. So she stays there. And that's where things really happen for her. She's pretty passive throughout, except she happens to see this message about a report. She happens to see a report about this message that was sent from Jupiter. It's something bounced off the sun at Jupiter, and she gets this idea, and her scientific mind is like, hey, we used to be a scientist. Let's do something with this. And so for a moment, there's like this glimmer of hope that maybe she's going to be a character again, right? And she decides, hey, let's see if we can send a message, bounce it off the sun. And so she does. She figures out how to bounce a message off the sun. No one at Red Coast Base wants her to do this. Okay, there are all the reasons they don't want her to do this. And she's like, well, but I want to. So she does. She figures out a way to do it. She bounces a message off the sun, and there's no response for a while. 8 years later, they get a response. 8 years later, the Trisolarans respond, and she dooms us, the Earthlings, to the Trisolarans. They can't solve their 3-body problem, so they're looking for a planet. They're looking for a place to go to, right? They're looking for something. Well, they found us through this message, and when they respond to us, she hides that fact for a bit. She's like, oh my gosh, they responded. No one's going to like that. What do I do? What do I do? And then she decides, well, I better respond back to them. And what the message that comes from Trisolaris is, do not reply to us. I'm a pacifist here in Trisolaris, and if you respond to us, we'll be able to figure out where you are, and we'll send a fleet, and we'll take over, and we'll, annihilate you guys, and it will be bad. Don't respond to us. And she's thinking about that, like, well, so she sends a message back saying, that's great. Come on and destroy us because we deserve it. She basically dooms the entire planet because she didn't care. She didn't care. Oh, so that's her arc. She doesn't care. She's apathetic. She's blank and flat and disconnected and dooms the earth because of it. I did not appreciate her. Okay. So the Trisolarans, they can't solve their 3-body problem, so they have to leave their planet. They realize through the messages that they have received about Earth that we're advancing scientifically pretty good clip. We're doing pretty good, and it's going to take them 450 years to get to us. And in that 450 years time, we probably will develop the resources to defend ourselves against the fleet that they're going to send. And they would rather we not be able to defend ourselves, so they're going to screw up our science. So they send 2 protons. They call them the Photon 1 and Photon 2. I don't remember now. Oh, I should have written that down. But they send a pair of protons into our atmosphere so that our scientists suddenly doubt all of our science. Suddenly, these scientists are like, wait a minute. We thought this was true, and now it's not true. This theory that was proved is now no longer a truth. And these scientists start dying by suicide because they can't handle the fact that everything they knew to be true is not true. All these theories and theorems and stuff are not actual factual any longer, and they're dying by suicide because of it, because their world has been turned upside down, and our science is being set back and set back and set back, as the Trisolarans wanted. But it's when those scientists start dying that, you know, investigators start paying attention, and Wang Mao is brought into the story like, hey, a couple of these scientists have died and we want to figure out why. Could you infiltrate this group over here for us? Could you be a mole and give us information? Let's figure out what's going on. And that is the synopsis of our story. There you go. Let's move on to talk about the characters. The characters. We have Ye Wenji, whom I've been talking about quite a bit, right? In case you haven't noticed, I was not a fan of her. In the story, sometimes, there at the very beginning, sometimes we would refer to her as Ye, sometimes we would refer to her as Wenji. Hold please, let me get to the front here. It explains to us that Chinese names are written with surname first. So for her name to be Ye Wenji, her surname is Ye. And so for us to be calling her by her surname throughout most of the book was just weird to me. I wasn't sure why we kept calling her by her surname instead of calling her by her first name, which would be Wenji. That bothered me. I don't know why, and maybe that's one of the reasons that I couldn't connect with her, because we kept calling her by her surname. I mean, if everyone I knew was calling me Lender, I wouldn't feel a good connection to them. My name is Sandy, not Lender, right? So that disconnect was happening for me in the book. And that was a little bit strange. Anyway, she sees her father murdered during the Cultural Revolution. She finds one of her professors also murdered, right? And losing those two people, I believe, is the inciting incident for our whole story. I mean, yeah, the Trisolarans having their problem is an inciting incident. Yeah, sending out the memo, the Chinese government sends out a memo to the stars saying, hi, we're Earth, and this is our history. That could be an inciting incident, but I believe the inciting incident for our story is Ye Wenji seeing her father murdered and finding her professor friend also murdered. I think that's it, because if she had not gone through that trauma, I don't think she would have become this disinterested, dispassionate, flat character who believed that it's okay to destroy the human race. I don't think that would have happened to her if she hadn't gone through these things, if that hadn't been our inciting incident. I read the translator's note, and he shared that incident with the Cultural Revolution and the struggle session where her father was killed was originally not at the front of the story. The author had buried that in the middle of the story for the original book that was released in China. And it was the translator's prerogative to move that to the front. And he did have the author's blessing to do so. And I think that's really smart. I really like the fact that was moved to the front, because I believe that without that background knowledge about Ye Wenji, I wouldn't have been able to understand her. I would have truly hated her without that understanding. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. I believe. Yeah. And that happened in 1967. Her father's murder and her professor friend's murder. That was 1967 when that happened. So we do have a lot of time jumps that happen in the book. A lot of back and forth happening in this book. You got to pay attention to stay on track. That is for sure. So what did I write here? In my notes, I said, I believe this is what turns her into the blank automaton we get for the rest of the novel. She murders her husband because, oh yeah, we'll talk about that. She murders her husband because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. She allows her daughter to pursue a science that is destructive mentally. And her daughter is one of the scientists who dies by suicide. And when we meet her in her apartment after the death of her daughter, she's just kind of blank. I mean, there are children who are still learning from her. She's still a teacher and she's still teaching science, but she just feels dispassionate. And I'm like, my God, if my daughter had just died, I would feel something, right? And especially if my daughter had just died, because I invited a foreign entity, an interstellar entity, to send crap to disrupt our science that caused my daughter to die. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of respect for this character. So let's move on to Wang Mao. Wang Mao, he is the scientist who is approached. The detectives, the police there in China approach him and are like, hey, some scientists are dying. We'd like to find out why. We think we can get you into this organization to talk to this organization, get some facts and information for us, be our mole. And Wang Mao is kind of like, I don't think I want to do that. And in one of the scenes, it was so silly. And I don't know if I have that marked or not, you guys, but I'll just tell you, in one of the scenes, he's like getting up and leaving the room because he doesn't want to be a mole for this police and military. The military and the police are like together in this briefing telling him, we'd like you to be our mole. He's like, I don't want to do it. And he's leaving the room. And Dashi basically, the police detective Dashi basically taunts him. Like throws some meaningless thing out there, just taunts him like, oh, you probably couldn't do this anyway. Whatever it is that he says to him, taunts him once, and Wang Mao turns around like, I'll do it. I'm like, that was really fast. That was quick manipulation right there. It was just a little bit forced and fake. It was weird, but it got us where we needed to go for the plot. So it worked. So I wanted to mention Wang Mao is a respected scientist, okay? Astrophysicist. Nanophysicist. He works with nanomaterials, okay? And he's respected. And his program is still in the experimental stage. He's working, he has people who work for him. His underlings work night and day on these experiments, and they've got to be perfect, right? Okay, he's respected in his field. And yet, in this story, he starts to go into a spiral. And we're going to talk about that because we see him do not just a character arc, but like a character roller coaster. We see some craziness happen to this poor guy. It's wacky, but we're going to start on page 75 because a crazy thing happens on page 75. Like we've met him and we go to this briefing with him, and we did meet him at his home. We started at his home with him, and there was no mention of a family. Okay, we go to this briefing, there's no mention of a family. Okay, then on page 75, to get rid of the anxiety, Wang forced himself to finish a roll of film. He returned home before lunch. His wife had taken their son out, and I put an exclamation point in the margin right here. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? His wife had taken their son out and wouldn't be back for a while. Usually, Wang would rush to develop the film, but today he wasn't in the mood, blah, 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 blah. He has a wife and a son. Surprise! And the wife and the son do factor in for at least a chapter or two, and then we never hear of them again. It's the wildest thing. Like at some point in the story, I just forgot that they existed because they're not important, but they were important for about a chapter because Wang Mao, and we call him Wang throughout the whole thing. We use his surname throughout the whole thing. Wang, he likes photography, which is important for a chapter or two. Okay. He likes photography. He goes out and takes lots of pictures of things to settle himself, right? To ease his anxiety. And I like that idea. That's a very poetic sort of idea, right? Creative. But he's taking these pictures and he's discovering there's a timestamp on these pictures that's not really a timestamp. And it turns out it's a countdown. It's a countdown clock on these things. And at some point, we also lose track of the fact that there's a countdown clock in this book, which is one of the cons, right? But that's okay. We do get back to the countdown clock at the very close to the very end when we get the message that we're all bugs. Yeah, we just have to hang. There's so many elements in here that you just have to hang on to because no one else is hanging on to them. I'm sorry. That was very negative. I'm so sorry. There are good things. We're talking about good things too. Okay. So he has a wife and a son, and they do assist in a chapter or two. Okay. Because he's got this photography habit that he really enjoys. Right. And so he asks his son and his wife to help him take some pictures because he wants to check out this countdown clock thing that he's discovering. Right. So he's like, what is this? Me? Am I losing my mind? He even goes to like his optometrist and is like, check out my eyes. What's happening here? So he has his son and his wife take pictures with other cameras, and that countdown clock thing is happening. Yeah. So he figures out something's going on. There's a countdown clock. Why? He's got to figure that out too. We don't necessarily figure it out. We just sort of get the countdown at the end. Unless I just missed it. Unless it just happened. So if it's in there and I just missed it, y'all can tell me in the comments below, because it's probably in there and I just missed it, right? Because there were so many characters who just showed up and then said something and then left. And yeah. Okay. What else we have? Okay. There is this cool thing that the author did with a parallel between Wang and his sense of being middle-aged and the Trisolaran listener and his sense of middle age. Okay, there's this cool parallel that happens. I'm going to point this out for you. Okay, so Wang, when we're looking at him on page 73, and he says, the next day was the start of the weekend. Wang got up early and left on his bicycle. As a hobby photographer, his favorite subjects were wildernesses free of human presence. But now that he was middle-aged, he no longer had the energy to engage in such indulgent travel and only shot city scenes. I put a question mark over there. It's like, geez, I'm middle-aged and I don't mind a little bit of travel. Anyway, yeah. But that thought right there that he's had, he's feeling that being middle-aged, he can't go out into the wilderness and travel as much as he used to. And so his hobby is now a bit curtailed because of that, right? That's his thought right here. Well, we have a listener in the Trisolaran population. He's a listener at an outpost who is basically listening for messages that might come through deep space. And on page 350, he has a similar thought. And I liked the parallel. Do I need to read you this whole thing? Oh, okay. I need to read you this whole thing. So here's a flavor of the author's writing from the Trisolarans' point of view. And he's calling his people. All right. Most people, of course, would have lost the ability to work productively long before then. They would have been forcibly dehydrated and the resulting dry fibers cast to the flames. Trisolaris did not keep the idle around. And I wrote out to the side, our society should be very afraid. But now the listener saw another possibility. It was inaccurate to say that the receipt of the extra Trisolaran message had no influence on his life. After confirmation, Trisolaris would surely reduce the number of listening posts, and posts like this one, behind the times, would be among the first to be cut. Then he would be unemployed. A listener's skills were very specialized, consisting only of some routine operations and maintenance. It would be very difficult to find another job. If he couldn't find another job within 5,000 Trisolaran hours, he would be forcibly dehydrated and then burnt. And then he talks about, the only way to escape that is to find a mate, have children, blah, blah, blah. Then he says, in the last few years, the listener had asked himself millions of times, is this all there is to my life? And millions of times he had answered himself, yes, this is all there is. All that you have in this life is the endless loneliness in the tiny space of this listening post. And I wrote out here, wow, a depressed Trisolaran is the first one we meet. So what a shame that this poor little Trisolaran. But his mental health state is kind of why he goes ahead and he sends these messages that he does on behalf of his people. I mean, he's the one who sends the message like, hey, I'm a pacifist, and if y'all there on Earth respond to us, we're going to come take over. So you might not want to respond. Yeah. Okay. There was also a parallel between this listener's reactions and the way he responded and Ye Wengji's responses. Like when she responded to the messages, those two had a parallel going on as well. I really like the way the author did that. So let's look at that. On pages 272. Hold, please. I'll get there. Okay, pages 272, 275, and 276. We see Ye Wengji at the Red Coast base. She has received this missive from Trisolarans out there in the world, and it's basically saying, do not answer. Do not answer us. Do not answer us. This world has received your message. I am a pacifist in this world. It is the luck of your civilization that I am the first to receive your message. I am warning you, do not answer. Okay? He's basically saying, there are tens of millions of stars in your direction. As long as you do not answer, this world will not be able to ascertain the source of your transmission. But if you do answer, the source will be located right away. Your planet will be invaded. Your world will be conquered. Do not answer. Do not answer. Do not answer. Okay, so this is the message she has received. And she's, when she receives it, this is how she recognizes that it's really something that has come from deep space, that it's something she should be looking at. She should translate and look at. She rushed to another terminal and checked the computer's rating of the signal's recognizability. A. Before this, no radio signal received by the Red Coast ever garnered a recognizability rating above C. An A rating meant the likelihood that the transmission contained intelligent information was greater than 90%. A rating of 5 A's was a special extreme case. It meant the received transmission used the exact same coding language as Red Coast's own outbound transmission. So she knows she's got a real message here. Okay, but let's look at page 348. Hold, please. Let me get up there. 348. This is the Trisolaran at that listening post also receiving a message. Here's how he did it. On this day, however, the listener saw something odd when he glanced at the waveform display. Even experts had a hard time telling with the naked eye whether a waveform carried information. But the listener was so familiar with the noise of the universe that he could tell that the wave that now moved in front of his eyes had something extra. The thin curve, rising and falling, seemed to possess a soul. He was certain that the radio signal before him had been modulated by intelligence. He rushed in front of another terminal and checked the computer's rating of the signal's recognizability, a red 10. Before this, no radio signal received by the listening post had ever garnered a recognizability rating above a blue 2. A red rating meant the likelihood that the transmission contained intelligent information was greater than 90%. A rating of red 10 meant the received transmission contained a self-interpreting coding system. The deciphering computer worked at full power. You see that just perfect parallel there, right? And that I loved that. I thought that was great. I was so excited when I got to the Trisolarans part of this and I saw that. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going through the same thing that Ye Wenji went through. That's so cool. Okay, but then when she responds, the way she responds is similar to the way he responds to. So on page 275 to 276, okay, she has crafted a message that she's going to send back. In spite of what his message said to her, she's going to send a message back to him. So on page 275, we're at the transmission console. The transmit button was a long rectangle, very similar to the space key on a computer keyboard, except that it was red. Ye's hand hovered 2 centimeters above it. The fate of the entire human race was now tied to these slender fingers. Without hesitation, Ye pressed the button. "What are you doing?" one of the men on duty asked, still sleepy. Ye smiled at him and said nothing. She pressed a yellow button to stop the transmission. Then she moved the control stick until the antenna was pointed elsewhere. She left the control panel and walked away. The man looked at his watch. It was time to get off work. He picked up the diary and thought about recording Ye's operation of the transmission system. It was, after all, out of the ordinary. But then he looked at the paper tape and saw that she had transmitted for no more than 3 seconds. He tossed the diary back, yawned, put on his army cap, and left. The message that was winging its way to the sun said, "Come here. I will help you conquer this world. Our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. We need your force to intervene." I could swear at her, but I won't. Okay, so then on pages 352, we have the way that the Trisolaran responded to this. So let's go over to page 352. Oh, okay. So the listener opened the resulting document, and for the first time, a Trisolaran read a message from another world. With the best of intentions, we look forward to establishing contact with other civilized societies in the universe. We look forward to working together with you to build a better life in this vast universe. That's the message that that the Chinese Republic had sent out into the world. And they had also sent like a few other pages of like Earth history, so documents. During the next 2 Trisolaran hours, the listener learned of the existence of Earth, learned of the world that had only one sun and remained always in a stable era, learned of the human civilization that had been born in a paradise where the climate was eternally mild. So there was some additional information in that first message that went out into the stars. And I had questioned that at some point in the book, so I want to bring that up. Okay, so then on page 352, he's getting ready to send his message back to her, which is the message of don't come here. The transmit button was a red rectangle. The listener's fingers hovered above it. The fate of Trisolaran civilization was now tied to these slender fingers. Without hesitation, the listener pressed the button. A high-powered radio wave carried that short message, a message that could save another civilization, into the darkness of space. Do not answer. Do not answer. Do not answer. Isn't that that's wonderful, right? I love that parallel. That repetition. And you know me, I like repetition and parallel structure. I love that in my books and my poetry and everything. And I loved the way it was used between Wang and this listener and Ye Wengji and this listener. I thought that was brilliant. I very much appreciated that in this book. All right. So what other characters do we need to talk about? We've talked about Ye Wengji. We've talked about Wang Miao. We've kind of talked about the listener in this, haven't we? Now, the police detective, his name, and I'm so sorry that I'm going to butcher this. His name is Shi Qing, but his nickname is Da Shi. So we're going to call him Da Shi. He is a truly obnoxious character. I did not appreciate him very much. I recognize that he was there to upset and make other characters do things. I mean, I get that, but I did not care for him much. Let's see. Because he is trailing Wang Miao, because he's following him, keeping track of him, he is able to just pop up anywhere and everywhere we need him in the story. I mean, anytime. Yeah, I would say pretty much any time that a scene finished, he could pop in there, and it made sense that he popped in there because he was following this main character. He was keeping track of him, ostensibly to keep him safe, right? I mean, he's following his mole. Okay, yeah. So anytime the story needed a push, he was there. So that worked. He is the one who gives us the plan to stop this ship. Remember I mentioned the Judgment Day ship, which I loved the name Judgment Day for that ship. He's the one who comes up with the plan to stop this thing. And you guys, we're going to talk about that for a little bit. So obviously he's a smart man. He's a smart detective. So he understands more of the science than he lets on, I think. I mean, he is used as a common denominator reader in the book. I mean, there are some passages where the science is just like whoosh, right over your head, and the translator has notes at the bottom and gives you like texts and places where you can go learn more about the science. And I ain't doing that because I don't need legwork when I'm reading a book. But there are other places where the science is explained, and it's explained through lots of exposition and dialogue with characters like Da Shi. Okay, like he can ask a question and one of the other scientists can explain it to him. And that makes sense to us as the reader because this guy is just a police detective. He doesn't have to know all the ways that nanomaterials work, right? He's not supposed to know that. So when that is explained to him, the reader gets it too. I mean, are you tracking with me here? Yeah, okay. Anyway, he gives us the plan for Operation Guzheng. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but he gives us the plan for this operation to stop the Judgment Day as it is going through the Panama Canal. Brilliant plan, brilliant idea, but oh my God, did it take forever? Oh my word. Let's see, did I write down for you? Oh yeah, the operation, like the discussion of the operation, like how to do this, like whether we should. It started on page 331 and went through page 339. I'm not going to read all that for you because it would put you to sleep. Trust me. Okay, but there are, I have some notes in here that we are going to look at, but I just wanted to mention that the page 334, really. Probably not. Oh, sorry, guys. I can't read my own handwriting. Hold, please. All right. On page 334, we have some notes. What's happening is there's a general who's in charge of everything. We've got some police officers, some military officers. We have Wang Mao all in this room together, having a briefing, trying to figure out, okay, how can we stop the Judgment Day and get the messages, the communications that have happened between the Adventists of the ETO who are on Judgment Day and the Trisolarans without the Adventists of the ETO deleting those files. How can we get those files? How can we get those communiques? How can we get that information off of Judgment Day? How can we do that? And so they're discussing it, and they're discussing, oh, we could use some grenades, we could use some flash bombs, we could drop this type of nuke. I mean, all these things that they're talking about, and they're like taking pages upon pages upon pages to discuss how they could infiltrate this ship and get those files. You guys, we spent more time talking about the grenades we might use for this mission than we spent talking about nanomaterials before. We spent more time talking about these grenades than I think we spent talking about the three-body problem solution. I might be exaggerating, but I don't think so. It went on and on. I wrote here, we're spending more time arguing about grenade tech than we spent figuring out the three-body problem. I wrote that on page 334. I wrote that in the margin because it was like, holy crap, why are we still talking about this? Let's just figure one out and go. We just figure one out and go. And at one point I went, ugh, just put them on the table and measure, boys, because these guys were like arguing over who has the most experience and who has done the most operations and who did what in Vietnam. I mean, they're just talking about, I mean, I wanted to start skimming, but I was afraid I would miss the actual operation they're going to do. You guys. All right, page 336. On page 336, we have some more notes where I said, oh, yeah, okay. I think the author employed Chekhov's law. I think. And I wrote here, you've got, and I underlined it, you've got to be kidding me. I feel like the author got lucky with Chekhov's law here because our detective says, we set up two pillars on the shores of the canal, and then between them we string many parallel thin filaments about 1/2 meter apart. The filaments should be made from the nanomaterial called flying blade, developed by Professor Wang. A very appropriate name in this case. So what they're going to do is they're going to set up a pillar on either side of the Panama Canal, and they're going to stretch these nanomaterial filaments between there, like string, right? Very sharp string. And then as the Judgment Day goes through there, you can't see these things. They're nanomaterials. The Judgment Day is going to go through it and get sliced up, right? Like slicing bacon. It's going to slice straight through there. And everyone aboard will die because they'll get sliced, right? And all this stuff will just slice, and the ship will stop because all of the mechanics and the engine, the propeller, everything will get slice. Brilliant. It is brilliant. I don't believe, and I think I wrote this here, I honestly don't remember anyone ever saying this name before page 336. So here on page 336, we talk about the flying blade. And maybe at some point in the beginning, we mentioned flying blade as the name of the nanomaterials. It's such a poignant name. I think I should have remembered it, but I don't. I just don't. So, but here it is. Here it is. And that's what we're going to call it. And that's great. So they set this up. You guys, they set this up in 4 days. In 4 days, they build these pillars that can, like self-erecting silos. That in the asphalt industry, we have self-erecting silos. They're self-erecting. They push the little thing, up they go, and their little filaments will like stretch between them. They do this in 4 days. And I am calling bullshit. Because we just had a bridge collapse, right? And they're saying it's going to take 10 years to rebuild that thing. Obviously, it should not take 10 years to rebuild a bridge. Down here in Florida, we can rebuild a bridge in a couple of days. because we're highly motivated. But no, okay. I will not believe that they built the pillars and strung even half that many nanofilaments in 4 days. You're having to string these things across water. I mean, the Panama government runs the Panama Canal. I'm sure they had something to say about this. China's going to come in here and start erecting stuff and putting. I would have liked to have seen how that took place. I mean, we had pages upon pages of talking about grenades. Could we not have a page talking about how we did that? It's okay. I'm suspending my disbelief. We did it. I'm sorry. Did I get worked up over that? I'm sorry. Well, you know, for my day job, I do deal with construction projects. I write about construction projects. I'm a construction magazine editor. You can't do this in 4 days. You can't do this in 4 days. There are permits you got to get. There are environmental sustainability permits you got to work with now. I mean, what material are those pillars made of? You got to give your carbon footprint for that. There are EPDs to keep in mind. All right, that's enough. That's enough being fussy. I shouldn't be fussy. They did it. They got it done. Each of these filaments is 160 meters long. They were strung between the pillars at the end of the eastern shore and one over there, blah, blah, blah. So the Judgment Day comes through. And I will say this. The author did an awesome, wonderful job of building the suspense of the ship coming through there. Okay, wonderful. I mean, we had, you know, he's 4 kilometers from here. He's 3 kilometers from here. He's 2 kilometers. And we had that that missive coming through over the radio while this other conversation is going on. And just and Wang Mao he's being distracted by the commander. The commander's trying to distract him, but he's not being distracted because he's so worried about it. And he's also worried about the moral implications of cutting down, literally, men aboard this ship, right? And he sees one of them die. So he's moved by this. It affects him, okay? And that was cool. That was well done. So the author did an awesome good job of building the suspense of that ship coming through there. And I wish, I don't think that I marked it. Y'all are going to have to read it yourself. There's a passage, there's a couple of paragraphs where the author describes the way the ship gets sliced up and how it comes apart like a deck of cards. It's very well done. Very well done. Okay. So all of that during our discussion of Detective Da Shi. I'll spit it out. All right. Okay. And then somehow Da Shi is the one who offers us this glimmer of hope when talking about bugs there at the end, pages 387 to 388. They're near the end. There you go. Okay, so those are our discussion of some characters. Obviously, there are many more characters than that in this book. There's a list of characters here at the beginning. Some of them, I don't know why we felt the need to list them, but we did, and we don't really do much with them in the story. Maybe they're more important in, well, those who live. Maybe they're more important in the second and third books, perhaps. But yeah, there we go. There are more characters that we're not discussing because they didn't add anything to the story, as far as I'm concerned. There we go. Now, let's talk about some pros and cons in the book. Obviously, I have been giving some pros and cons as we've been talking here about the synopsis and the characters and some themes. But I did write down some pros and cons here on the last page of notes. We're almost through the notes, you guys. So let's try to do this equally so that I don't overdo the cons, because I don't want to give the impression that this was a bad book. I just did not enjoy the book as much as other books I have read. Okay, let me say it that way. There were parts of this, as I've just mentioned, that I did enjoy. There were parts of this, like that parallel structure that happened, brilliant. The description of the ship coming through the Panama Canal and the suspense that was built up there, brilliant. I loved that. But there were other things that, doggone, just kind of made me fussy. And one of the things that I should not have been fussy about was the use of mind-numbing exposition. And I shouldn't have been fussy about that because That is just a stylistic difference. And the translator even mentioned that in his notes. He just mentioned that there are differences in the storytelling novel style in China, Chinese literature, and the American science fiction literature that we're used to nowadays. Okay, there's just differences, and one of those differences, I'm assuming, is that use of just huge swaths of exposition. There, in the beginning of the book, there was a huge swath up. There you go, page 16. Who is this that's talking? It begins on page 15. We have Ye Zati, the father that is murdered. We have him thinking, and he is, let's see, as he listened to his wife's lecture, Ye allowed himself a wry smile. And then it's internal monologue is what we have here. Page 16. Okay, page 15, page 16, and it stops at almost the bottom of page 16. So page and a half of internal monologue. That's an awful lot, right? For the beginning of a science fiction novel. But that's just because it's a different style, right? It's just a little bit different. So yeah, there were other moments, like there is a section where we were interviewing one of the scientists. I don't remember which one. We were interviewing one of the scientists, and we had pages and pages and multiple pages of his dialogue. It would have been internal monologue if he wasn't telling the story to two police detectives and another scientist, right? It was just exposition. That kind of exposition happened a few times throughout the book, and that is not exciting to me as a reader, but it's just a style thing. And maybe that shouldn't be considered a con, but there you go. Okay. The theme that society is useless and deserves to be conquered by an outside force, that I considered a con. Obviously, we discussed that at the beginning. We don't need to go over it again. There was this stilted, as you know, dialogue, language happening all over this book. As I was getting the notes ready for you guys, and I was looking back at some of these red tabs, I noticed I had written, as you know, as you know, as you know, in the margins. Even on pages that don't have a red tab, I had written, as you know, out in the margin. I'm like, oh, goodness. Okay. So apparently that was an issue that kept coming up. Just dialogue where one character was telling another character something like, well, on Sundays, this happens here, blah, blah, blah. And people, as you know, today is Sunday, therefore, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, just things like that were happening. And that is something that we're taught as authors not to do. So when I was seeing it happening all over the place, I'm like, oh, criminy, stop doing that. That's just a nitpicky thing. Just nitpicking. Get Wang's disappearing family. Okay, so let's talk about the pros. Let's talk about really good things that happened in this book that were awesome and great. Okay, page 69. Page 69. Let me get there, you guys. Here you go. I should just look for pink tabs. Okay, I wrote in the margin, this was brilliant. All right, page 69 is what? An example of the science being spelled out and foreshadowed. Okay, nice, good. What do I say here? All right, so we have Wang Mao has gone to the boyfriend of Ye Wingji's daughter. Ye Wingji's daughter has died by suicide. The boyfriend is there at their apartment, and he is showing Wang Mao a science experiment that they tried there at the house. And it's easy because it's like with a billiard table, right? He's like, check this out. They do 5 experiments. He says, all right, during these 5 experiments, the mass of the 2 balls never changed. In terms of their locations, as long as we're using the frame of reference of the tabletop, there was also no change. The velocity of the white ball striking the black ball also remained basically the same throughout. Thus, the transfer of momentum between the 2 balls didn't change. Therefore, in all 5 experiments, the result was the black ball being driven into the pocket. Ding picked up a bottle of brandy and 2 dirty glasses from the floor. He filled both and handed one to Wang. Wang declined. Come on, let's celebrate. We've discovered a great principle of nature. The laws of physics are invariant across space and time. All the physical laws of human history, from Archimedes' principle to string theory, and all the scientific discoveries and intellectual fruits of our species are the byproducts of this great law. Compared to us, 2 theoreticians, Einstein and Hawking, are mere applied engineers. I still don't understand what you're getting at. Imagine another set of results. The first time, the white ball drove the black ball into the pocket. The second time, the black ball bounced away. The third time, the black ball flew onto the ceiling. The fourth time, the black ball shot around the room like a frightened sparrow, finally taking refuge in your jacket pocket. The fifth time, the black ball flew away at nearly the speed of light, breaking the edge of the pool table, shooting through the wall, and leaving the Earth and the solar system, just like Asimov once described. What would you think then? Ding watched Wang. After a long silence, Wang finally said, "This actually happened. Am I right?" Ding drained both glasses in his hands. He stared at the pool table as though looking at a demon. Yes, it happened. In the last few years, we finally obtained the necessary equipment for experimentally testing fundamental theories. 3 expensive pool tables have been constructed, one in North America, another in Europe, and the third you are familiar with, in Guzheng. Your nanotechnology research center earned a lot of money from it. These high-energy particle accelerators raised the amount of energy available for colliding particles by an order of magnitude to a level never before achieved in the human race. Yet, with the new equipment, the same particles, the same energy levels, and the same experimental parameters would yield different results. Not only would the results vary if different accelerators were used, but even with the same accelerator, experiments performed at different times would get different results. Physicists panicked. They repeated the ultra-high energy collision experiments again and again using the same conditions, but every time the result was different, and there seemed to be no pattern. Okay, that introduces the fact that these 2 protons had been sent from Trisolaris, but we don't know that yet. We don't get that until further into the book, right? But here we are. They're setting up, the author is setting up the problem, but he's also explaining the science. He's explaining the experiment. He's explaining what happened, and we're seeing what happened. And if you just tuck this away in your memory, when you get to that fact that Trisolaris sent 2 protons into our atmosphere to do this very thing, it's like, click. That makes sense. Brilliant, right? Nice. Yeah, nice. Let's see. Oh, okay, page 168. We have a fabulous line in here, you guys. Brilliant. The Chinese government is going to send out a memo, this missive into the universe, out to the stars, right? And so they're having an internal memo, a debate, if you will, about what should be in that message, right? And one of the things, instructions from central leadership. Others have already sent their messages out into space. It's dangerous if extraterrestrials only hear their voices. We should speak up as well. Only then will they get a complete picture of human society. It's not possible to get the truth by only listening to one side. We must make this happen, and quickly. And I love that. I underlined it. I put a line around it. It's not possible to get the truth by only listening to one side. I love that. I love the fact that that's in this book. I love the fact that we're sending that concept, that thought around the memo, around the room. We're coming up with that idea. I like that. I thought that was brilliant. And then let's see. Yeah, okay. Then let's see. 133, page 133. Oh, yeah. Okay, Wei Shen. Do I talk about what's happening with him? Not Wei Shen, Dashi. This character, Wang Mao, and I wonder if I've got it marked. Hold, please. I hope I have it marked. I don't know if I've got it marked. Yeah, okay. At the beginning of chapter 11, I marked that Wang Mao, I wrote, he's avoiding work, drinking, smoking, playing video games. This dude is totally going to kill himself. That's what I wrote up here. Okay. Because he has accepted the mission to infiltrate the ETO, right? He started playing the 3-body problem video game. I don't know if he was playing it. He was entering the video game sphere and watching others, right? So he's playing video games. He started smoking, he's drinking, he's not going to work. He's called off a sabbatical, right? He's avoiding going into work. And I'm looking at this like, darn, he's going to kill himself. He's going to go the way of these other scientists who became overwhelmed with the fact that they couldn't live in the world anymore, right? It was just weird. But a couple of pages before, we have Dashi speaking to him and almost offering some support, right? And he says, anything sufficiently weird must be fishy. I underlined that line. And, Wang is like, what kind of crappy rule is that? He says, I'm saying that there's always someone behind things that don't seem to have an explanation. And isn't that the truth, right? The Trisolarans were behind the wacky science. Yeah. Anyway, it seemed like Dashi was trying to give him some support, trying to keep him from dying by suicide, trying to help him. And I thought it was nice, a nice little push in the right direction there. Yeah, but is that enough? The video game, we've mentioned the video game a little bit, but the video game, it factored in probably, I would say the first third of the book. We had the video game, maybe the first half. We had the video game taking place. Wang Mao logged in and participated in the game to see what was happening, and he wanted to help solve the 3-body problem. And he offered some ideas and some science and some information to the different players that were playing in the game. And his ideas were like, oh, we've already thought of that. Oh, we've already thought of that. Oh, we've already thought of that. So each thing he was trying to offer them, it seemed like they had already tried it, or they're, oh, we recognize that you're brilliant. We recognize that you're a genius because someone has thought of that before, and only a genius would think of that. So it was interesting that he was in there coming up with ideas, but it seemed like every idea he presented, someone had already thought of, or someone was like, oh, you're a genius for having thought that already. It was weird. But the game, like I mentioned before, think of Ender's Game. Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game, because the game is real. They're really trying to come up with a real solution to the problem that Trisolarans has, which is basically their sons are going to consume their planet and destroy their civilization. They would prefer that not happen. Of course. Is that enough? Have we rambled enough on this? I have a bookmark in here for some reason too. Now, plot. Yeah, when I got to page 135, I wrote plot at the top, and I was very excited about that because it looks like we've got the idea that humans are living in harmony with nature, and we need to get back to that was being presented. I'm like, ooh, that sounds like a plot to me. I guess maybe it is. Because if humans had been in harmony with nature, then Mike Evans wouldn't have turned his oil tanker into the Judgment Day to speak with the Trisolarans to come out here and destroy us. And if humans had been in harmony with nature, then maybe Ye Wenjing wouldn't have decided, Earth sucks, we should be destroyed, and wouldn't have sent that message off to the Trisolarans. Who knows? There you go. You guys, the Netflix series, I don't know how long it's going to be new. I don't know how long it's going to be streaming. You might enjoy that. The book has some good points in it and some good plot points and some good stuff. There is good stuff in the book. I personally didn't enjoy it. You might enjoy it very much. You don't know. You can give it a try. It was published quite some time ago, so you may have already read it in advance of the Netflix series. Leave me some thoughts in the comments below. I've asked some questions throughout this video. Please give me your responses in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about the story, about the themes, about the book, about the fact that society doesn't have to suck. It doesn't have to be pointless. We can all be nice to each other, and we can all be loving, and we can all help one another. We don't have to be at war. Thumbs up for books that make you think. There you go. This was a long one, you guys. I'm so glad I'm done with this book. So glad. So glad. Did I tell you that I told you about the airplane. There was a gal on the plane who was like, so glad that I was reading it, even though I didn't want to. She was glad I was finishing it. Like, yeah, well, there's always something good in a book. and we can talk about the good stuff. So here we are. Please subscribe to the channel. Please encourage your friends to subscribe to the channel too, because we talk about all kinds of books here. Science fiction, fantasy, mystery, horror. We're going to be doing some poetry stuff here during the month of April. So it's just the whole smorgasbord of good booky things.